In 2012, Danish police officers arrested a sex offender and found child assault media on his computer. In order to find the person who actually took the photographs, photos recovered from the computer were handed off to Homeland Security investigators' Cybercrime Center. The officers examined the images and found a detail that could help catch one of the photographers. In a bathroom, the predator had placed a child on the counter in order to take the illegal photographs. In the background of the photo, there were products, including prescription medications. Zooming in on the pill bottles made the details unreadable, so investigators, utilizing technology which had not been released to the public, were able to take a look at the bottle and reverse out some of the motion blur in order to reveal the photographer's first name, the first 2 letters of his surname, and the first 3 digits of the prescription order. Detectives then utilized that information to find the owner of the bottle. His name was Stephen Keating. However, despite having a name, there was still not enough evidence to prove that Stephen himself took the photos. Some played devil's advocate and said that perhaps he had lent the bottle to a friend, or maybe the real child predator had stolen the bottle. Luckily, another recovered image from the same photo shoot included a grown man's fingers. The officers boosted the contrast in the image before running the visible fingerprints through a federal fingerprint database. Eventually, they found an accurate and perfect match to Stephen Keating. On November 15th, special agents arrested Stephen from Jessup, Georgia, and also rescued 3 abused children, 2 girls, aged 2 and 6, and a 12-year-old boy. Evidence presented at his hearing showed that between 2009 and 2011, Keating repeatedly sexually abused the 3 children under the age of 12 in order to create both pictures and videos. He then distributed the abused media. In addition to the 3 children named, further investigation following Keating's guilty plea revealed that Keating had sexually abused 12 other minor victims whose abuse was not captured on film. Stephen was sentenced to 110 years in a federal prison. On the evening of July 22, 1993, one of Oklahoma's wealthiest men, Charles Frederick Urschel, and another oilman, Walter Jarrett, were playing cards on the porch of the Urschel home in Oklahoma City. Suddenly, 2 men armed with machine guns drove up and forced Urschel and Jarrett to enter their car. They robbed Jarrett and set him free, but Urschel was to remain captive for 9 days. The kidnappers took every precaution to make sure they would not get caught. They kept Urschel blindfolded at all times, and even filled his ears with cotton and put tape over them. Taken to a Texas hideout, Urschel was forced to write a ransom note a few days later. The note demanded $200,000, which was to be delivered by E. Kirkpatrick of Oklahoma City. The note also asked Tulsa oilman John H. Catlett to act as a negotiator with the kidnappers. The kidnappers forced them to go through an elaborate series of steps to deliver the money. First, they asked John to place a newspaper ad for a fake farm in the Daily Oklahoman. They said that after the ad was placed, they would send him the exact location to deliver the money. On July 28th, an envelope addressed to the Daily Oklahoman was received, asking Kirkpatrick to pack $200,000 in genuine used Federal Reserve currency in the denomination of $20 bills. The letter told the man to take a train to Kansas City at 10:10 p.m. and to check in to the Mulebach Hotel under the name of E. Kincaid of Little Rock, Arkansas. He was told to wait at the hotel for further instructions. Once Kirkpatrick arrived, he was instructed to leave the Mulebach Hotel in a taxicab and proceed to LaSalle Hotel. He was then told to walk west a block or 2. Accordingly, Kirkpatrick took the bag containing the $200,000 and arrived at the LaSalle Hotel at about 6 p.m. He then walked west. After proceeding no more than half a block, he observed a man approaching him, who, upon reaching Kirkpatrick, said, quote, "Mr. Kincaid, I will take that bag," and reached out and took it. The man who had taken the bag told Kirkpatrick to return to the hotel and that Urschel would be returned within a specified time. Urschel was freed 3 days later with $10 in his pocket for cab fare. Despite being rendered blind, half-deaf, and sleep-deprived, Urschel had kept track of every detail of his journey. He was interviewed by the FBI and was able to provide a detailed statement of his kidnapping. Urschel stated that immediately after Jarrett's release, one of the men produced some cotton, a short bandage, and adhesive tape. He was then blindfolded and his ears patched up. Approximately 1 hour after being blindfolded, the car he was in passed through what he said was either 2 small oil fields or the end of 2 large fields. He recalled he could smell gas and could hear the oil pumps working. He also remembered the exact times when planes flew overhead and even how many steps the kidnappers made him take. Urschel provided an approximate time between such landmarks, which enabled FBI agents to estimate the distance between them and cross-reference Urschel's recollections with maps of the nearby areas. With the information submitted by Urschel that airplanes flew over one of the houses at approximately 9:45 a.m. and at 5:45 p.m. daily, a review was made of all airplane schedules within a radius of 600 miles of Oklahoma City. A check of the Fort Worth to Amarillo line of American Airways disclosed that a plane left Fort Worth daily at 9:15 a.m. and Amarillo, Texas at 3:30 p.m. From this information, it was determined that these 2 planes would be in the vicinity of Paradise, Texas between 9:40 and 9:45 a.m. and between 5:40 and 5:45 p.m. A check of the suspects, who had been under investigation by the Bureau, disclosed that Shannon, Catherine Kelly's mother, lived near Paradise. The FBI carried out a raid on her house, and George Barnes, also known as Machine Gun Kelly, an infamous gangster. George's wife, Catherine Kelly, and several others were eventually arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment for the kidnapping. In May of 1992, the body of a woman, later identified as Denise Johnson, was found outdoors in the brush near some Palo Verde trees in Maricopa County, Arizona. Her clothes were scattered around the area, and she had been bound with a cloth and braided wire. It appeared that she was murdered and left at the location very recently. A pager belonging to a man named Mark Bogan was found near the body. Police questioned Mark, and he claimed he had picked up Denise Johnson hitchhiking and that they had had consensual sex. However, he claims he made her get out of the truck after they had argued. She had apparently stolen his pager. He denied ever being at the crime scene and denied killing her. While going over the scene, investigators looked at the surrounding trees and noticed a scrape on a branch. Detectives remembered that 2 small seed pods from that very species of tree had been found in the back of Mark's truck. However, since the tree was fairly common in the area, it was not enough to tie him to the scene. Police decided to obtain the assistance of a plant molecular genetics specialist, Dr. Timothy Hilangaris, of the University of Arizona. Police decided to obtain the assistance of a plant molecular genetics specialist, Dr. Timothy Hilangaris of the University of Arizona. He could compare the DNA profile of the seed pods recovered from the suspect's pickup with those of the trees in the vicinity of the crime scene. Timothy created a complete genetic database of the trees found in that area and was able to prove that the DNA seed pods in Mark's truck was a perfect match to the DNA of the scraped tree. Prosecutors also said the tree's trunk contained a scar consistent of being hit by Mark's truck. Mark Bogan was convicted and sentenced to life in prison in what would be the first murder case in the United States which involved plant DNA. In 1985, Gary and Kathy Eastburn lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, with their 3 daughters, Cara, 5, Aaron, 3, and Jana, 22 months old. Gary was a captain in the Air Force, and he had orders to relocate to another country. Before the family's planned departure, they decided to find a new home for their dog. An Army Sergeant, Timothy Hennis, responded to their ad in the newspaper. In early May of 1985, Hennis met with Catherine at her house to adopt the dog. On May 12th of 1985, a neighbor, aware that Gary was attending a squadron officers training school in Montgomery, Alabama, noticed that a few newspapers had not been picked up at their house, and he had not seen anyone enter or leave the Eastburn residence in days. Concerned about the well-being of the family, the neighbor went to the front door to check on them. From outside the house, the neighbor heard a baby crying. When he knocked on the door and no one answered, the neighbor called the police. When the police entered the home, they found Catherine, who had been sexually assaulted and stabbed to death. 2 of her daughters, Karen and Erin, had also been brutally murdered. The 22-month-old baby, Jana, was still alive, but severely dehydrated, just hours from death. The authorities believed that the family was killed either the night of May 9th or in the early morning hours of May 10th. The killer had attempted to clean up the crime scene, but there was just too much blood. Nothing was stolen from the house except a small amount of cash and an ATM card. During the investigation, a man named Patrick Cohn recalled that he had seen a man leaving the residence 3 nights prior on the night of May 9th. The witness told police that the man got into his white Chevette and drove off. According to Patrick, the man was approximately 6'4" with blonde hair, wearing a dark members-only jacket atop a white shirt and blue jeans. Based on this witness's description of the suspect, a police artist drew a sketch of the man's face. Following the news coverage of the triple murder, Sergeant Hennis voluntarily paid a visit to the police station. He told detectives that when he saw a photograph of Catherine Eastburn on television, he realized she was the woman from whom he had recently purchased his dog. He fully cooperated with law enforcement and answered all their questions. According to Hennis, he never entered the Eastburn residence and only spoke to Catherine from the porch. However, Hennis became a prime suspect in the case later on when it was found he closely resembled the sketch. Additionally, he had just taken a dark, members-only jacket to the dry cleaners, and he also drove a white Chevette. 2 neighbors claimed they saw a man matching the same description, walking down the Eastburn street around the time of the murders. The police also discovered 2 $150 withdrawals tied to the same missing ATM card. Witness Lucille Cook said she saw a man matching Hennis's description use the same ATM around the time Eastburn's card was used. Cook also identified Hennis from a photo lineup. According to the prosecutors, Hennis and his wife were separating and he was having money problems. On that day, he tried to hook up with Catherine, but when Catherine rejected his sexual advances, he flew into a rage and murdered her and her 2 children. In 1986, Hennis was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, because the evidence against him had been quite circumstantial, his attorneys were able to get him a retrial 3 years later. This time, Hennis was acquitted, and he resumed his career in the Army. He retired from the Army in 2004. In 2006, more advanced DNA testing was performed on the semen samples acquired from the crime scene. Unfortunately, Hennis had already been tried and acquitted for the murders. Therefore, double jeopardy prevented prosecutors from trying him again. Double jeopardy prevents an accused person from being tried again for the same or similar charges following an acquittal or conviction. However, the authorities devised a way around the double jeopardy. The Army forced Harris to reactivate and then charged him with the murders in military court. In April of 2010, the jury found Hennis guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder and sentenced him to death. He currently sits on death row at Fort Leavenworth. On April 27, 1997, Celeste Nurse delivered a baby girl via cesarean section at Groot Shire Hospital. 2 days later, a woman disguised in a nurse's uniform took the infant and escaped with her. The hospital immediately contacted police. However, in their search for Zephanie, the newborn baby, only a few untraceable items were found, including her baby bed, her garments, and a handbag which had no identifiable items in it. A pillow was later discovered in a tunnel, which gave women in labor direct access to the ward from the public street. At the time, police believed someone pretending to be pregnant had stolen Zephanie. For 17 years, her biological parents, Mornay and Celeste, held on to the hope that their daughter would be found. They spent the next few years raising awareness about their kidnapped daughter in the media, but to no avail. Zephanie's biological parents went on to have another daughter, Cassidy, 4 years later. In 2015, Cassidy began to attend a new school and met a girl 4 years her senior. The two girls were remarkably similar in appearance and formed an immediate friendship despite the 4-year age gap between them. Their fellow classmates also noticed a strong resemblance between the two girls. When Cassidy told her father about the girl who closely resembled her, he set up a meeting between the two to see for himself. After meeting with the girl and seeing the striking resemblance to his lost daughter, her father alerted the police to his suspicions that the girl was actually his lost daughter, Zephany. Zephany's adopted parents could not provide any proof that she belonged to them, so DNA tests were conducted, which confirmed that Zephany was indeed the nurse's long-lost daughter. In March of 2016, the woman who raised Zephany was arrested for kidnapping. During the trial, it was revealed that the kidnapper had suffered miscarriages and was desperate to have a child of her own. The court heard how she wanted a baby so that her partner, Michael, would marry her. She denied stealing the infant and claimed a woman named Sylvia had handed her the baby at Wynberg Station, but this was dismissed by the court as a fairy tale. In August of 2016, the kidnapper was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The sentenced woman's husband had no idea Zephany was not his biological child. On her part, Zephany said she cannot dismiss the only people she knew as parents for almost 2 decades. During the trial and after sentencing, Zephany chose to live with her adoptive father. Zephany said she felt distraught that her kidnapper and adoptive mother was arrested and charged with such a serious crime. She also said that, despite the kidnapping, her adoptive parents raised her well. The girl's name was withheld from media in favor of her privacy. In 2019, Zephany Nurse applied for the ban restricting the publication of her legal name, Mish Solomon, to be lifted, which was granted by the High Court in Pretoria. Her kidnapper was identified as Lavona Solomon. In 2019, Mish began to spend more time with her biological parents and her siblings, and the relationship is growing well. And although Mish has severed ties with Lavona Solomon in light of her incarceration, she doesn't hold any ill will against the baby burglar. Mish, who is now married, has 2 children of her own.